Hello, welcome to Fictional Narrative. I'm Neri. Today I'm going to be reviewing A Simple Favor. I rated this book a 4 out of 5, and yes, I did watch the movie first, and I'm glad that I did because I would have been so mad if I had done it the other way around. They're both equally as good as each other. My issue has to do a lot with the characterization, which I will get into because this story is extremely character driven. It runs through 3 different points of view: Sean, Emily, who is Sean's wife, and Stephanie. So the basics of the story is that Emily's son, Nikki, is best friends with Stephanie's son, Miles, and they become friends through this friendship of their sons. One day, Emily calls Stephanie and says, "Can you do me a simple favor? Pick up my son from school, bring him, have a play date with him at your place for a while, and I'll come pick him up because I have something to do." She ends up missing for multiple days, and nobody seems to really care except Stephanie. And Stephanie's like, yeah, she wouldn't leave her kid with me, and also I have her kid. Like, someone needs to come and take responsibility for this little boy because legally I do not really have jurisdiction, I guess. It's not her kid. I would be livid if this happened to me. Where would that put me? What if something happens to your son? Why can't I reach anybody? So it takes her a few days to get a hold of Sean, who's in business meetings in England, and he comes home and he finally takes his son home and he goes, "Yeah, it's weird that Emily's gone." And they finally get the police involved. It just took some time. So this book starts with Stephanie's point of view, and then it goes into Emily's, and then Sean's, and then it kind of cycles that way. We're going to talk about Sean first. So the way Stephanie describes him, he presents himself as this hyper-masculine, successful businessman. He is the most weak-willed person in this story. He is the weakest link, and I would say cut it off, but he takes responsibility for nothing. The fact that he goes along with his wife's harebrained insurance scheme, it couldn't be his fault. It was obviously her. She's manipulative. And yes, she is manipulative. But he also didn't have to go along with it. All she did was show you some, home development shows and suggested it. So, either she's really good at advertising or... He also won't take responsibility for the fact that he's with Emily. On the first day, he's like, she's showing me weird movies. She's kind of a weird person. And he doesn't cut it off. He's like, "My life will never be boring." So after Emily goes missing, the police find a body in a lake, which has her DNA. So Sean thinks that she's dead. I think anybody would think that their significant other is probably dead if their body was found in a lake wearing their wedding ring. Then he proceeds to move on to the nearest, most convenient person that's already taking care of his son, which he doesn't want to take responsibility for because he was vulnerable. Essentially, he already puts himself in this really bad position as recently being widowed and then also then moving on with the best friend of his dead wife. Stephanie then moves in with him, even though his son isn't even 100% okay with it. There's a scene in the book where Nikki and Miles had run off and watched a movie that was scary that they weren't supposed to watch, and then Nikki had it in his head that Stephanie had killed his mom and cooked her up and served her for dinner. He doesn't even take responsibility for the fact that he moved on with Stephanie. He just says, "Oh, I was in a vulnerable place." Even though he described her walking into a room was as if you were to expect her date was gonna stand her up. Why are you with this woman? The only thing I will say that is good of him is, despite the things that Emily tries to do to him, he wants to fight for his son. Now let's talk about Emily, our villain character. And she is a really, really good villain. Except when she's not. For example, thinking up the idea of an insurance scheme in the first place, as she watched Double Indemnity, that didn't turn out well. It turned out needlessly complicated. Just like this story is gonna get needlessly complicated. She does some unnecessary things. Originally, her scheme was to go missing, be presumed dead, go to Europe, change her identity, and then her family would join her. They would be a family living off $2 million in Europe. So the scheme starts, and she had just gone missing when her twin calls. And her twin is not in a good mental health state. And so she's calling Emily basically to say her farewells. And Emily drives out to the lake house to see her sister and ends up murdered. But that's after she gave her sister her wedding ring. That's the body that they found in the lake. Was it necessary for her sister to die? No, because Emily had thought of, getting her sister help because she was a drug addict. And she thought of introducing her sister finally to her family, the people who are important to her, because her sister is important to her. But she doesn't do any of those things. Now, the next unnecessary thing that happens after Stephanie and an insurance investigator catches on to the fact that Emily has a twin. And Emily then proceeds to make an appointment with the insurance instructor, meet him, kill him, and then have Stephanie help her dispose of the body. She also asked for Stephanie to bring the recovered wedding ring to her, which she accidentally drops at the scene of their crime. When the body of the insurance investigator is discovered by the police, they find the ring and they go to Emily, and Emily then pins it on Stephanie saying, she was with my husband. They were gonna get married. This was her ring. So now Stephanie is in trouble. I don't have too much sympathy for Stephanie because she is quite possibly the most infuriating character of all. I mean, yes, Emily is a villain. Emily is bad. Emily is irredeemable. But Stephanie? Let's talk about Stephanie. Stephanie is a mommy blogger. She's also quite possibly a professional gaslighter. Throughout the book, we see her documenting things, but only in a way that makes her look good. She also wants things she can't have. Her son Miles, his father is not her husband, it's her brother. Stephanie can't have Sean. She knows she can't have Sean, even during this point when Emily is missing. And she definitely has a lot of trouble with it after Emily's sister is found dead. But she makes it on her blog and in her mind seem like it's all okay because they're all grieving together, and she's helping the family, she's helping to raise Nikki, she's helping them with food, meals, things like that. She's being a good mom. So much of her identity in her head revolves around being a good mom. Oh, at one point, Stephanie even daydreams that if Sean and Emily both go to jail, that she would get custody of Nikki, and it would be great, and she would be like a super mom, and she could, put it on her blog. These are children. Also, why would she get custody of Nikki? Like, you may not have other relatives to take care of Miles if you go to jail, but Sean has other family. Emily has other family. There's going to be a list of people before it even gets to Stephanie. The problem with Stephanie is she is 100% the kind of person who needs to take a hold of the narration of her life. She creates this narrative of herself that is kind. She wants people around her to believe that she's innocent. But if you get close enough to her, like Sean or Emily, they have both expressed frustration with her character because she's this type of person who also keeps hinting that she's done something very, very bad in the past and she's wallowing in it. She has this type of weird mindset that goes even beyond that. To the point where when she and Emily meet up, so that Emily can explain to her what's going on, Emily is able to play her because in Stephanie's mind, she is only the victim. She can never be the person who is at fault. So Emily tells her this completely made up story about how Sean abused her and how she needed to go away and do these things and how the insurance scheme was Sean's idea. And Stephanie buys it. Because the only thing she wants more than Sean, she doesn't want him anymore, is to be Emily, or be as close to Emily as possible, in which case is to be Emily's friend. And when she buys into this narrative, despite the fact that there are glaringly obvious things that this obviously could not happen, she just decides, oh, it's okay. And I'm going to be your witness. I witnessed nothing, but I'm going to say that I did. So we're going to stick together, as best friends do. I think the part of her character that is so infuriating to me is that we all know somebody like this. I think we do, or at least we've seen them on the internet, right? So this is the type of person that you can absolutely encounter in your day-to-day life, maybe to a lesser degree, and they try to get away with everything. So the fact that Emily basically named her accomplice as the mastermind of disposing the body of the insurance investigator, it sucks for the insurance investigator because she's not the one who killed him, but I don't feel bad for Stephanie. And it's a major departure from the movie. This is where the movie comes in. The movie makes Stephanie likable. The movie allows her to become a detective by the end of it, and she has this good life, and things just happen to her. Am I saying that Emily was good to her? No. She needs to cling to the idea that she's a good mom. She needs to cling to the idea that she is innocent, that she is helping someone, because otherwise, the truth is, and she talks about it, she is kind of aware of it, she's not a good person. And if you really think that I kind of downplayed this whole Stephanie wants what she can't have, and that she wants to be Emily or be as close to Emily, meaning being Emily's friend, she has also masturbates to the thought of being Emily. It's really funny to me that both Emily and Sean, through all of their mess, see right through Stephanie. But also, if there was ever like a sequel or like a next generation of this book, it's going to be their sons. Their sons are the biggest living victims in this entire story. They're best friends. By the end of the novel, they don't even spend that much time together anymore because Emily wants to stay apart from Stephanie. And at the end of it, Nikki and Emily go on the run. You have Nikki, who is glad to have his mom back, but had to go through therapy and so much grieving because his mother decided, oh, well, I'll just fake my death for a little bit. Poor Miles. His mom is crazy. Poor Miles. I feel bad for Miles throughout this. He's a kid who has gone through so much grief and is going to go through more because of Emily turning his mother in, but also because his mother is willing to play along with something like that instead of really putting her son first, or maybe going to therapy herself and having a better mindset where she's not obsessed with continuously doing other people simple favors. Just a little body disposal, it's okay. If I had watched the movie later, I'd be so upset because I'd still want Stephanie to be punished. I don't want her to be likable, but I didn't. So I got to enjoy both pieces of this media. My one critique that would have made it over the top, like would have made it 5 out of 5 stars, is if law enforcement was actually competent. Throughout the book, law enforcement doesn't do anything. And it seems like the officers are often described as tired, uninterested. If we had really a cat and mouse game on all ends, the suspense and the stakes would be so much higher. And we only got one glimpse of that, which is the insurance inspector, because he did enough of his job to realize Emily has a twin. He's dead. Obviously, if there were more detectives on the case, she can't kill them all, and it would be about 10,000% more interesting. And then we could send them all to jail and it would be fine. I don't want it to just seem like I'm just complaining about this cast of characters. These characters needed to be what they were in order for this book to work, and I do appreciate them. And I would definitely recommend this book to someone who loves drama and getting mad at fictional drama. I do. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching. Bye!